Every congregation faces a quiet crisis that rarely makes it into an elders' meeting. Biblical illiteracy is growing, even among people who have attended faithfully for decades. Attendees possess the individual pieces of the story, but without the sequence, the connection between them remains invisible. They know the stories, but don't know what Jesus said first, or how the Sermon on the Mount connects to the conversation with Nicodemus. Without an overarching framework, the Gospels can feel like a scattered collection of snapshots, rather than a single unfolding encounter. True comprehension requires more than just the pieces. It requires the whole picture. Most modern churches reinforce this fragmentation through their architecture. Youth groups, adult education, and the pulpit operate in isolated silos, separated by thick, impermeable barriers. This structure sends a silent message. Bible study is an age-specific activity. It suggests that children do one thing, adults do another, and eventually, the study of Scripture is something you grow out of. Separating students from adults hides the actual process of faith. A teenager sees the walls of her own classroom, but she never sees the adults down the hall wrestling with the exact same hard questions. These disconnected curricula ensure that faith remains a private, compartmentalized exercise. When the family leaves the building, they carry 3 different messages that rarely intersect. In September 2026, River Chase Church of Christ is launching a structural shift to bridge these gaps. It's a 15-month commitment called Conversations with Jesus, Chronological. For 65 consecutive weeks, every demographic from junior high to senior adults will study the same text in the same chronological order. Every recorded conversation Jesus had will be covered by the entire congregation at once. By removing the educational silos, the church forces an immediate synchronization. It builds a shared vocabulary that spans the entire congregation. We can track how the synchronization works by looking at this network node map. When everyone studies the same text, like Jesus healing the paralyzed man, information flows through the congregation differently. A 13-year-old in a junior high class discusses the passage. He wonders if someone could lie by a pool for 38 years because they've simply gotten used to not getting better. Down the hall, that teenager's father hears the same story. He realizes that he too has been paralyzed by his own habits for a long time. At Sunday lunch, the conversation happens naturally because the same lesson landed in the same family through 2 different doors. They are already speaking the same language. When the preacher speaks on that same text, the message hits from 2 directions at once. The sermon becomes a continuation of the class rather than a separate activity, reinforcing the word across every room in the building. This shared vocabulary turns isolated lessons into a 15-month dialogue. The Bible moves out of the classroom and into the daily life of the community. This structural network relies entirely on the people in the rooms. Without prepared teachers, the curriculum remains just a book on a shelf. These teachers spend hours studying the original Greek, exploring the historical context, and praying for their students by name. They do this preparation so that the classroom feels safe enough for people to ask the questions they've been carrying for years. A teacher's presence is what turns a printed lesson into a safe environment. They are the reason a student feels comfortable leaning forward to ask a question that finally has a place to land. After 15 months of this, the congregation changes. They trust each other more and talk about faith more naturally because they have spent over a year practicing it together. By week 65, the entire church reaches the shores of Tiberias to hear the risen Christ ask Peter, "Do you love me?" They arrive at this conclusion as a group that has walked with Jesus from the beginning to the end. A unified conversation anchors the community's identity in the actual words of Jesus. It ensures that the Bible is the shared architecture that holds everything else together.